It was a rainy morning in downtown Minneapolis, the kind of rain that only left a light mist on the streets, blurring the glass doors of Holston and Royce Consulting. The lobby inside was sleek and polished, as if every surface was designed to impress. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead mingled with the subtle scent of freshly brewed espresso. People moved swiftly, their tailored suits sharp and purposeful, earbuds nestled in their ears, phones gripped tightly in their hands. It was the picture of professionalism, a place where everyone was rushing, but no one noticed anyone else. Then, through the glass doors, entered Terrence Dupree. He didn't quite fit the usual mold. Dressed in a dark navy trench coat, nothing designer, just functional. He carried a leather briefcase that showed signs of wear, the kind that told a story of hard work and years of experience. No Rolex, no bodyguards, just a tall, calm, 44-year-old black man with clear eyes that seemed to take in everything, yet demand nothing. At first, no one noticed him. He was just another person blending into the hum of the office. Except for Megan, the receptionist, barely looking up, glanced at him with disinterest. Her name tag read Megan, and she couldn't have been more than 26. With her blonde bob and thick lashes, she wore AirPods in one ear, the other ear completely closed off to the world around her. As Terrence approached her desk, she didn't even bother to meet his eyes. Instead, she flicked her gaze to the clock behind him, signaling that his presence was merely a minor inconvenience in her routine. "Hi, I have a 10 a.m. with the executive board," Terrence said, his voice calm, polite, the tone that of someone who belonged. Megan blinked at him, the slightest hint of skepticism crossing her face. "With what department?" she asked, barely masking the boredom in her voice. "I'm here to meet with the board of directors." "It's scheduled," he replied. She gave him a half-hearted glance, barely pausing before smirking. "Sales? Vendors don't use this entrance." Her tone was dismissive, like she couldn't imagine anyone important would walk through the door with the unassuming look that Terrence wore. Terrence didn't flinch. He didn't argue, didn't offer credentials or make a scene. He simply paused for a second, assessed her, and gave the smallest nod, turning on his heel without another word as he walked away. Another employee, a junior associate, stepped off the elevator, his eyes wide when he saw who he was about to dismiss. "Mr. Dupree, you're early." "There still." The words faded as Terrence walked out of the building, his calm demeanor never wavering. Inside, Megan returned to scrolling through her phone, unaware that the man she had just turned away was about to change everything. Terrence Dupree wasn't born into a life of luxury or privilege. He didn't have a silver spoon in his mouth or a family network to lean on. His journey to success wasn't paved with opportunities handed to him. It was built from the ground up, one brick at a time. He was born in Mobile, Alabama, in a modest two-bedroom house that always felt like it was tilting slightly to one side. The house had survived a storm in '92, but its foundation was fragile, much like the lives of the people who lived within its walls. His mother, a hospital custodian, worked tirelessly through the night shifts to provide for him and his younger siblings. She had no time for rest, barely scraping by. His father, when he was around, made a living hustling car repairs out of the family driveway. It wasn't the picture of a stable childhood, but it was their reality. Terrence learned early that nothing in life came easy. If you wanted something, you had to work for it, and work hard. He was the kind of kid who noticed how things worked when others were too busy to pay attention. While his peers were sneaking out of the house, texting girls, or getting into trouble, Terrence was sitting in front of a broken monitor, propped up by a phone book. It wasn't the latest technology, but it was enough to start teaching himself how to write code. His friends didn't get it, and frankly, neither did his parents, but Terrence didn't care. He was building something. He was building himself. By the time he was 16, he had assembled his first functioning desktop computer out of discarded school parts. But this wasn't about playing games. It was about learning how machines communicated with each other. It was about understanding the power of technology, the way it could transform industries, change lives, and provide opportunities where none seemed possible. While most of his classmates were concerned with the fleeting things that come with adolescence, Terrence was focused on something much bigger. He wasn't just learning to use technology, he was learning to master it. Terrence didn't take the conventional path. He didn't belong to the elite, and that was fine with him. He didn't rush into college with a full scholarship or an invitation to join the coolest fraternity on campus. He entered Tuskegee University on a partial scholarship and finished in the top 5% of his class. But he wasn't part of the popular crowd. He didn't need to be. He wasn't at Tuskegee to make friends or follow trends. He was there to build something that mattered. While others were partying or enjoying the college experience, Terrence was focused on his mission. He was determined to change the narrative of his life. His first attempt at entrepreneurship came in the form of a small platform for managing mobile team schedules. He developed the idea while living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Birmingham, Alabama. It was a small start, an underdog project that lacked the flash or glamour of Silicon Valley, but it was his. The platform was ambitious, designed to help businesses streamline their mobile workforce, but despite his efforts, it failed. That was a bitter pill to swallow, but it didn't break him. It only fueled his drive to improve. Terrence didn't sulk or give up. He reworked his idea, rebuilt it, and tried again. His second attempt was better, more refined, and more practical. And this time, it worked. It got acquired by a larger company, and while that was a win, it wasn't enough for him. He didn't want to be a part of someone else's vision. He wanted to create his own. So he went back to the drawing board and founded DTech Solutions, a logistics optimization company that would change the game. DTech Solutions was born not in the high-rise offices of Silicon Valley, but in a modest office space. There were no flashy launch parties, no angel investors pouring in millions, just contracts, clean delivery, and systems that worked. Terrence wasn't concerned with being noticed. He wasn't looking for fame or recognition. What mattered was getting the job done. His company was founded on the principles of hard work, integrity, and innovation. By year 4, major logistics companies across the Southwest were using DTech to coordinate truck shipments. The technology worked, and the results spoke for themselves. But even as DTech grew, Terrence kept his circle tight. He didn't need the trappings of success to validate his worth. He didn't need to be surrounded by the right people in the right places. His worth came from what he could build, from the integrity of his company, and the value he brought to the table. By the time he was 44, DTech had become one of the fastest-growing SaaS firms in the region. It wasn't based in New York, Los Angeles, or Silicon Valley, and that was just fine with him. The validation he needed didn't come from a zip code or a prestigious address. It came from the success of his company and the lives it impacted. Terrence Dupree was the kind of person who never needed to prove himself. He didn't care about the flashy cars, the designer clothes, or the power lunches. What mattered to him was the work, the results, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done something meaningful. The world may not have been watching, but that was okay. He wasn't in this for the applause. He was in it for the impact. By the time Holston and Royce came into the picture, Terrence had already reached a level of success that many could only dream of. The $42 million deal he was about to close with them was just the latest in a long series of milestones, but it was a big one. This was the kind of deal that could propel DTech to new heights. It was 7 months in the making, meetings, background checks, projections, and paperwork all carefully reviewed and signed off on. All that remained was the final step, the face-to-face meeting with the board of directors. But what Terrence didn't expect was the dismissive attitude of the receptionist at Holston and Royce, someone who couldn't see past his unassuming appearance. Someone who didn't recognize the power and success standing right before her. What Terrence didn't expect was for that single moment, that one brief encounter, to turn everything on its head. He had seen this kind of thing before at banks, at hotels, and even at tech conferences. People assumed he was part of the staff, a vendor, or worse, invisible. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't going to be ignored. This time, it wasn't just about business. It was about something bigger, something far more important. It was about respect. And that, as Terrence would soon prove, was a currency more valuable than any deal or contract. The moment Terrence Dupree stepped out of Holston and Royce's building, the weight of the rejection hit him. The city's rain, still light but persistent, misted against his coat as he walked down the street. His steps measured, deliberate. There was no anger, no frustration, just an icy calm. Inside, he knew the moment he'd been dismissed by the receptionist, Megan, that something would shift. He wasn't sure how or when, but he could feel the tension building, a pressure in the air that would eventually crack. He didn't stop walking. He didn't turn back. He simply carried on. The business deal, the one that had been months in the making, suddenly felt irrelevant. This wasn't about the contract anymore. This wasn't about a $42 million deal that could change everything for DTech Solutions. No, this was about something deeper, something more personal. Terrence had learned long ago that when you're underestimated, dismissed, or ignored, you have a choice: to be angry or to be silent. He had chosen silence. His silence wasn't weak, it wasn't defeat, it was power. People underestimated that kind of silence, but it spoke volumes. It spoke to the strength of his character, the resilience he had built from years of fighting against the odds. The same character that had been honed in the toughest conditions. The same silence that had allowed him to rise from the streets of Mobile, Alabama, to the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the region. And now, his silence would speak louder than any words ever could. As he walked, his phone buzzed twice. The first was a message from his VP in Phoenix. The deal was still on track. Everything was greenlit for the contract signing next week. That was good news, but it wasn't enough to bring back the spark of excitement he'd had earlier in the day. The second message was from Travis Archon, CEO of Archon Systems, one of Tekka's closest competitors. Terrence's hand hovered over the screen for a moment before he tapped the message. The conversation was short but precise. Terrence didn't waste words. "Travis," he said, his voice calm but carrying an underlying weight. "I've got something for you." Travis, half surprised, half amused, responded with an immediate, "What's going on? You don't usually call me unless someone's really messed up. Who is it this time?" Terrence didn't miss a beat. "Holston and Royce. They didn't even let me into the building." His words were matter-of-fact, without anger, without emotion. But the impact of them was unmistakable. A pause followed on the other end of the line. Travis's tone shifted from casual to serious. "You're kidding." "Nope. Receptionist told me to leave. Never even checked the calendar," Terrence replied flatly. "Damn," Travis muttered, clearly taken aback. "You walked in there looking like a vendor, didn't you?" "More like a delivery guy," Terrence replied, his voice dry. "Either way, I wasn't worth their time." The silence on the phone was longer this time. Then Travis spoke slowly, carefully. "You serious about what I think you're about to say?" Terrence's reply was sharp, yet calm. "I'm ready to redirect the deal if Archon can meet the same terms. I mean all of them. No compromises." There was no hesitation in Travis's voice as he replied, "We can. Our lawyers have already reviewed the last draft. We're ready." 2 months ago, Terrence's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Good. Then consider it yours. I'll have my general counsel reach out by end of day. We'll move fast." The conversation ended swiftly. Travis was thrilled, but Terrence didn't share his excitement. For him, this was not about winning. This was about respect. This was about ensuring that DTech Solutions wasn't just another company that could be dismissed without consequence. Terrence didn't need applause or validation. What mattered to him in this moment was showing Holston and Royce that their arrogance would cost them dearly. He slipped his phone back into his coat and glanced up at the skyline. The office building loomed in front of him, standing tall and proud. But to Terrence, it no longer seemed impressive. It now looked hollow. It looked empty. He was walking away from something that was supposed to be the next big win in his career, but in that moment, it felt like nothing more than a hollow victory waiting to collapse. Back inside Holston and Royce's grand glass building, the boardroom was still buzzing with quiet excitement. The final meeting, the one that would seal the deal, was supposed to happen in minutes. The board members, the executives, the negotiators, all of them were prepared. They had worked for months, sifting through contracts, making calls and sending emails, all leading to this moment. But Terrence wasn't there. The negotiator, checking his watch for the 10th time, asked nervously, "No call, no text? We're expecting him in 5 minutes." His question was met with uneasy murmurs. The senior partner at the table frowned, frustration creeping into his voice. Call him again. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding. An intern was sent to check the lobby, but when he returned, his face was pale, his voice trembling. They said someone came in earlier, but they turned him away. Thought he was a contractor. The room fell silent. The realization hit them all at once. They had just turned away the man they were about to sign a $42 million deal with. Their arrogance, their presumption had cost them everything. They didn't just lose a deal. They lost something far more valuable, the respect of a man who had worked his entire life to build something meaningful. Simone Barkley, one of the senior partners, was the first to speak. Her voice was sharp, her eyes narrowed with realization. If he walked out and if he's serious about this deal, it's already gone. Don't bother trying to salvage it. No one responded. The words hung in the air, like a heavy weight. They all knew she was right. Terrence Dupree didn't play games. He had been dismissed, insulted, and now he had made his decision. There was no turning back. The room was still as the minutes dragged on. They had no way of knowing that the deal they had spent 7 months preparing for was already slipping through their fingers. And as the time ticked by, a sinking feeling began to settle over the entire boardroom. They knew the consequences of their actions. They knew the cost of their arrogance. The ripple of Terrence Dupree's decision to walk away from Holston and Royce hit like a storm breaking against a fragile coastline. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was subtle, the kind of tension that quietly builds before it has a chance to truly erupt. But once the waves started crashing, they didn't stop. The firm had no idea what was coming. Not yet. But the moment that Terrence had made the call to Archon Systems, their carefully crafted world was on the verge of collapse. By the time the clock struck 2 in the afternoon, the first crack in their empire appeared. The confirmation email from Archon Systems hit inboxes across the firm, announcing the formal partnership with D-Tech Solutions, the same $42 million deal that had been in Holston and Royce's grasp for 7 months. The one they were convinced they had already won, had slipped through their fingers. In a matter of minutes, everything had changed. Everything they had worked for, all the meetings, the paperwork, the projections, it was all gone. And it wasn't just the deal that vanished. Their reputation began to unravel in the same breath. As the email hit, the boardroom fell into an eerie silence. The news felt like a gut punch. Someone, a senior partner, dropped their pen, the sound of it hitting the table louder than anything that had been said in the last few minutes. It was the kind of moment that stops time. No one knew how to process it, how to make sense of it. Holston and Royce had prided themselves on their reputation, their ability to secure major deals, and to navigate the complex, cutthroat world of corporate negotiations. They were the kings of their industry, or so they thought. But now, they were staring at the consequences of their own arrogance. How could this happen? One of the partners muttered under their breath, clearly in disbelief. They had all seen the signs, the hesitation in the room when Terrence wasn't there, the way the negotiators had brushed it off, assuming it was just a minor delay, a personal emergency. They had convinced themselves that they could salvage the deal, that it wasn't as serious as it seemed. But now the cold reality set in. The deal wasn't coming back. And the worst part? They didn't even know how to fix it. Simone Barkley, a sharp-eyed partner who had pushed for the deal from the very beginning, stood up slowly. Her face was ashen, her eyes narrowed with sharp focus. You don't walk away from 7 months of negotiation unless you already know where you're going next. That man doesn't bluff, she said, her voice low, but carrying the weight of undeniable truth. We just insulted one of the sharpest operators in this industry. It hit them then, the magnitude of their mistake. The arrogance that had led them to dismiss Terrence because of his unassuming appearance. The firm had thought it was just a formality, a small, insignificant meeting. But they had underestimated Terrence Dupree. They had assumed that his quiet demeanor, his lack of flashy appearances, meant that he was someone they could brush aside. They couldn't have been more wrong. Simone's words were like a punch to the gut. But they weren't the end of it. The news was already spreading. The story of Terrence being turned away, not just from a building, but from an opportunity, from respect. started to leak out, and the firm's reputation began to suffer in ways they hadn't anticipated. The media had a field day with it. A business blog out of St. Paul picked up the story, and within hours it was all over the internet. The headline read, "Tech giant D-Tech walks away from major deal after being snubbed in lobby, signs with competitor instead." The backlash was immediate and it spread like wildfire. Reddit exploded with reactions, Twitter buzzed with takes on the story, and within hours, the story went viral. People were furious not just on behalf of Terence Dupree, but because they recognized the truth in his experience. This wasn't just a story about a corporate deal gone wrong. It was a story about arrogance, about assumptions, about the way people of power dismissed those they didn't deem worthy. And the internet was not going to let that go unnoticed. But for Holston and Royce, it was only the beginning. The damage was not just about a single deal slipping through their fingers. It was about everything they had built crumbling. The firm had been founded on its connections, its pedigree, its image. It had relied on the assumption that success was defined by who you knew and how you looked. They had placed all their faith in their ability to charm their way into securing contracts, to rely on their status to win business. And now that very image was shattered. Their arrogance, their need to judge people by appearances, had exposed their vulnerability. As the week wore on, the phone calls came in. One by one, Holston and Royce's clients started to pull back. At first, it was small accounts, contracts worth a few $100,000 here and there. But it didn't stop there. The more time passed, the more clients seemed to drift away. A senior advisor in the firm, a man who had always been confident and calm, now found himself sitting in a meeting with his head in his hands, unable to hide the frustration. "We've lost over $1.8 million in projected earnings," he muttered under his breath, his voice a mix of disbelief and resignation. "We're hemorrhaging business, and we don't even know how to stop it." The dominoes had begun to fall. Within 10 business days, Holston and Royce lost 3 major contracts. And then it was the government pilot project, a deal 2 years in the making. They'd been counting on it. The firm had built their future on it. And now it was gone, slipping into the hands of Archon Systems, who had secured the deal not with flashy promises, but with quiet, reliable service. The very service that Terence had built D-Tech on, the service that had been underestimated by Holston and Royce. The stock price, once steady, began its slow descent. 12%. In just 1 week, investors grew nervous. Panic set in. Behind closed doors, the board members and senior partners started turning on each other. Blame was thrown around like confetti. Some called for heads to roll, others wanted to do a complete rebrand. But no matter what they did, the damage was done. It was irreversible. And then, at the heart of it all, Megan, the receptionist who had unknowingly ignited the firestorm, sat at her desk. She didn't understand what had happened. Not at first. But as the emails and phone calls came in, the weight of her actions started to sink in. She wasn't just the person who turned away a CEO. She had been the catalyst for the downfall of an entire firm. Her actions were a reflection of a deeper problem at Holston and Royce. They had built their empire on assumptions about people, about power, about who belonged and who didn't. And now they were paying the price. The cost of arrogance wasn't just financial. It was reputational. It was personal. And it was irreversible. By the time the week was over, the firm's leadership was unraveling. The walls in the office seemed to close in on them. The halls were quieter than they had ever been. The arrogance that had once defined Holston and Royce was now its greatest weakness. The morning after the news broke, Holston and Royce felt different. It wasn't just the palpable tension that hung in the air, thick and suffocating, nor the whispers that seemed to echo in every corner of the office. It was the deafening silence that had settled over everything. The kind of silence that makes you realize the world has shifted and you were too slow to recognize it. It didn't take long for the gravity of the situation to become undeniable. The clients, one by one, began pulling back, citing concerns about the future direction of the firm and changes in partnership dynamics. The more they said, the more the firm's facade crumbled. Investors called to inquire about the firm's sudden drop in stock value, and the phone, once constantly ringing with offers and opportunities, now sat eerily quiet. Holston and Royce, once a powerhouse of corporate strategy and negotiation, now looked like a sinking ship, and the rats were starting to jump. Simone Barkley, who had fought so hard for the deal with D-Tech, could feel the weight of her choices pressing on her. She had seen it coming in those last moments before Terrence walked out of their lives. But even she hadn't predicted how fast the downfall would come, nor how brutal it would be. Every day, the firm's internal atmosphere grew colder. The partners who once exchanged pleasantries in the hallways now passed by each other with nothing more than curt nods. There were no more laughs in the break rooms, no more chatter over coffee. Just the heavy, stifling quiet of a place slowly dying from within. Meanwhile, Megan, the receptionist who had unknowingly set the wheels of destruction in motion, continued her daily routine, unaware of the chaos she had helped unleash. Her role seemed small, insignificant, but as the days wore on, the weight of her actions began to take root. She couldn't escape the strange feeling that something was wrong. The office, normally buzzing with activity, felt like a shell of its former self. But Megan couldn't connect the dots. She had no idea that she, in her moment of indifference, had turned away the man who held the fate of the firm in his hands. And yet, the ripple effect of her dismissal would be the catalyst for everything that followed. It wasn't until that afternoon, as she sat sipping her iced coffee and scrolling through her phone, that the truth finally landed. An email from HR, forwarded by one of the senior partners, arrived in her inbox with a subject line that felt ominous. Immediate discussion required. Her stomach churned. She clicked on the email, but as she read the words, she felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. It wasn't just a reprimand. It wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation to a meeting. A meeting with the firm's executive team. Megan's heart raced as she walked into the conference room later that afternoon. There, in the stark, sterile space, the faces of the senior partners greeted her with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. They didn't need to say much. The silence spoke for them. The weight of their stares was enough. Megan felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, waiting for the inevitable fall. "Do you understand what you've done?" one of the senior partners asked, his voice low but laden with accusation. Megan could only shake her head. She felt small, so small in that room. Her pulse quickened as the realization hit her. This wasn't just about her telling someone to wait in the back. It was about what she had dismissed without even realizing it. She hadn't known who Terrence Dupree was. She hadn't recognized the magnitude of his presence. She hadn't understood that she was turning away the CEO of a company that was already worth more than the firm she worked for. And now, she was the reason Holston and Royce had lost the biggest deal in its history. "Your actions have cost this firm more than you can imagine." Simone Barkley's voice cut through the air. Her eyes were cold now, calculating. She had always been the one who championed growth, who pushed for the big wins. But now, it seemed she was the one holding the firm together by the thinnest of threads. I didn't know. I didn't know who he was. I never meant for this to happen." Megan's voice trembled. She felt tears prick at the back of her eyes, but she fought them back. This was no time for weakness. Yet, it was clear the moment she had dismissed Terrence, she had sealed her own fate. "That's the problem," Simone said, her tone sharp. "You didn't listen. You didn't see. You didn't understand that the world is changing. That people like Terrence Dupree, the ones you look past, are the ones you should be paying attention to. And now we're paying the price." The silence that followed was suffocating. The weight of Simone's words hung in the air, thick with the realization of what had been lost and who was responsible. But it wasn't just Megan who was at fault. It was the entire firm, blind to the quiet power of those they deemed unworthy. Holston and Royce had prided themselves on their connections, their appearances, and their reputation. But they had overlooked the very thing that had gotten them this far: respect. Respect for those who had earned it, for those who had risen not through privilege, but through sheer grit. Megan didn't have much of a chance to speak after that. The partners discussed the future of the firm in hushed tones. She was dismissed from the room, her fate sealed before she even had the chance to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. She was handed a manila envelope containing her termination papers. There were no harsh words, no shouts of anger, just a cold, detached professionalism as she walked back to her desk to gather her things. The office around her felt more foreign than ever. The walls seemed to close in, the faces of her colleagues now distant and uninterested. The high-powered firm that had once felt like a world of possibilities now felt like a sinking ship, the air thick with tension, regret, and blame. Megan left quietly, her head held low. She didn't look angry, not really. She was just numb. The weight of the realization was too heavy to process all at once. But as the elevator doors closed behind her, she couldn't help but think, how had I not known? How had I let this happen? Back in the boardroom, Holston and Royce's leaders were still grappling with the fallout. There were no easy answers. No one knew what would happen next. All they knew was that their arrogance had led to a catastrophic loss. And now, they had to live with the consequences that in the coming weeks, things only worsened. The firm's internal dynamics were fractured beyond repair. The once bustling office felt like a ghost town. Senior partners, some of whom had been with the firm for decades, quietly resigned or were pushed out. The damage was irreversible. And at the center of it all was Terrence Dupree, a man they had underestimated, a man they had dismissed without even realizing his power. As for Megan, she had learned a painful lesson, one that she would carry with her forever. That sometimes it isn't the loudest or most obvious people who make the biggest impact. And that in business, just as in life, respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn by recognizing the value in others, no matter who they are or where they come from. 2 months had passed. 2 long, tension-filled months where the dust of Holston and Royce's collapse had settled. But the firm's scars were far from healed. Inside the firm's now quiet halls, the damage was apparent. From the dwindling number of clients to the sinking stock price, to the resignation of partners who had once been the pride of the firm. Holston and Royce, the corporate giant that had stood so tall, now felt like a crumbling tower in the wind. The gravity of their arrogance had knocked them off their pedestal, and there was no escaping the consequences. But in the midst of their decline, one name continued to echo in the firm's halls: Terrence Dupree. The man they had turned away. The man who had quietly, without fuss, changed the course of their fate. And while they continued to flounder in their missteps, Terrence had been quietly moving forward. D-Tech Solutions had signed a new partnership with Archon Systems. Their schedules and logistics optimization platform was now gaining traction, gaining respect in places where Holston and Royce had once held a monopoly. The lessons of humility, respect, and true power had played out in full. And though Holston and Royce had lost everything, Terrence had gained the one thing that no amount of money or reputation could replace: respect. Then came the day Terrence returned to the firm. It was almost anticlimactic in the way it happened. No cameras. No press release, no grand announcements, just a man, walking into the same lobby he had been turned away from only months earlier. The same glass doors, the same cold marble floors, the same fluorescent lights buzzing above. It was all the same, except for one thing. This time, the guard at the front desk stood up immediately when he saw him, radioing upstairs, as if to signal that this was no ordinary visitor. A shift had taken place. And everyone inside the building could feel it. Terrence's demeanor was calm, as it always was. The navy coat he wore was no different from the one he had worn that day. The leather briefcase was as worn as before, telling the same story of resilience and hard work. He wasn't dressed in a flashy suit, wasn't adorned with gold watches or flashy accessories. He didn't need any of that to show who he was. What he had built, the company he had created from scratch, spoke for itself. It was the power of the mind, the power of quiet persistence, and the power of knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. As Terrence entered the building, a subtle shift occurred. People paused. Conversations slowed. Some stared, unsure of how to react. It wasn't that they didn't recognize him. It was that they recognized him too well now. The man they had dismissed had become more than just a CEO. He had become a symbol of dignity, of patience, and of quiet power. Terrence didn't look for recognition. He didn't need validation from anyone who had once dismissed him. He wasn't there to gloat. He wasn't there to rub it in their faces that they had made a monumental mistake. No, he was there for one reason and one reason only: to move forward on his terms. He walked into the same conference room where the deal was supposed to have been signed, where they had all waited expectantly for his arrival, only to watch him slip through their fingers. This time, though, things would be different. Simone Barkley was waiting for him. She had been one of the few who had seen the potential in Terrence from the start, the one who had advocated for the deal, the one who had seen past his exterior and understood the quiet strength he carried. But now, even she had felt the weight of the firm's decline. She had respected him from the beginning, and in the end, it was that respect, or rather, the lack of it from others, that had cost the firm everything. Terrence stepped into the room, and Simone didn't stand up. Instead, she simply nodded, acknowledging him with a slight bow of her head. There was no need for words, no need for pleasantries. The lessons had already been learned. "I'll make this quick," Simone began, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "The firm has taken a beating. We've lost contracts, clients, and our reputation is in tatters. I know you're not here to kick us while we're down, but I'm here to tell you that the people responsible are no longer with us." Terrence nodded, his face a mask of calm. He didn't need to hear it. He had already known. The firm had shown him who they truly were, and he had made his decision. He had made it not out of spite, but out of necessity. It wasn't about pride. It was about principle. Holston and Royce had built their success on the wrong values, assuming that appearances, status, and connections were enough to win respect. Terrence had proven that true power came from within, from humility, from respect, and from the kind of quiet integrity that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Simone continued, "We've made changes and we're committed to rebuilding. But I understand if you don't want to give us a second chance." Terrence stood for a moment in silence. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle in. He knew what this firm could have been. He knew the potential it held. And despite the arrogance they had shown him, he wasn't here to see them fail. He wasn't here to watch them crumble into nothing. No, that wasn't what he was about. "Simone," he said, his voice low and steady, "I'm not here to watch you fall. I'm here because at the end of the day you still have potential. And that's something I don't take lightly." There it was, his decision. It wasn't about holding grudges. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about giving people the chance to learn and to grow. Terrence had made his mark. He had proven what true power looked like, and now he was extending an olive branch. He wasn't here to destroy. He was here to rebuild. The room was silent for a long moment as everyone processed what had just happened. The weight of Terrence's words hung in the air, and something incredible began to happen. It wasn't just the firm that was rebuilding. It was the people within it. They had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power doesn't come from the suits you wear, the deals you close, or the companies you build. It comes from how you treat others, from recognizing their value, and from having the humility to admit when you've been wrong. As Terrence left the conference room, there was no fanfare, no applause. But there was a feeling that things were about to change. And for Holston and Royce, it was a feeling they hadn't had in a long time. Hope. In the end, Terrence didn't need to say more. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. And that, my friends, is the most powerful lesson of all. If you've learned something from Terrence's story, something about the value of humility, respect, and quiet strength, make sure to take that lesson with you. If you want more stories like this, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us all of the importance of character, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned, because you never know when the next game-changing story will come.